What's up there, Workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and it is time for another community feedback, this time on what you guys are thinking about 4.3 and what you're expecting from 4.4 and beyond. Now, this week is brought to you by Patreons. Our Patreons are absolutely incredible, and we appreciate each and every one of you, and we just wanted to say thank you right here. Give everybody a chance to say thank you to them down in the comments below. Definitely let them know that you appreciate the way they support this channel for us, and if you guys have considered it, definitely feel free to consider becoming a Patreon yourself. Now, let's dive in. Now, the first comment comes to us from NS Omega 13, and you say content. Stormblood feels extra hollow to me. One dungeon, one trial, and a raid. I'll probably never do. And OK24 man, the last patch was just as hollow. In my opinion, they need to do way more content than they regularly deliver. I had an 87-man free company that has dwindled down to 2 active members because the game is extremely boring now. And I think that you guys are going to catch a theme here. Now, I did try to only pick comments that they did not answer in the most recent Q&A that Brian and I went over. Things like the companion app, things like why Eureka was not released at the time of 4.3. That is all stuff covered in the Q&A of the questions they did take. This is just the questions of things that they did not take directly. And so, honestly, I think that this is a theme with Stormblood. The content they have done have been very inventive, very engaging, but the trade-off is that the reduced content schedule to give us that has left us with not enough content to last the amount of time between patches. Now, the great thing about this is this means this content will hold up as it enters roulettes. You have to think every dungeon is not just important in the patch that it's released, but because of the way the roulette system works, we're going to be playing that dungeon for years and years and years to come. So giving me 3 bad dungeons is just increasing the odds that I get a bad dungeon when I hit that roulette queue. So, I don't necessarily want more almond veils, more Sestashes where I get it and I'm like, well, this is more of the same and I'm afraid somebody's going to quit. Especially Almond Veil, it just always feels like somebody drops the moment we get in and it's a healer or a tank. And so then we're just stuck there waiting. And so I love that they're making content very engaging, but I think that in the meantime, they need to somehow go back and say, okay, we have an enormous backlog of previous dungeons. And if they're going to release dungeons at a slower pace, it would be nice to see if they would actually maybe do something to make the previous dungeons more engaging. Brian and I have talked about it a lot like WoW's M+ system releasing savage versions of the raids where you can set a savage difficulty from 1 to whatever, 14 for Final Fantasy 14, or just 1 to infinity. And the higher you set it, the more it sets modifiers, it sets exponential scales on the boss, and it really encourages you to push that level sync and to push your pacing and go in there with a static and just see how far you can make it and get some kind of reward in return. Carlos Hernandez says, I would love to ask if they plan to do something beyond 4.5 with Stormblood. They had hinted at it before, and I think it would be interesting if they did that. It would be the first time they break the 1 to 0.5 cycle. That said, doing that would mean that we would get 5.0 later than we normally would. Now, keep in mind, Carlos, by the way they're pacing the FanFest and everything like that, it looks like we are going to be going beyond that 0.55 that ARR and Heaven's Word did, so we'll at least be getting a 0.6, and technically if they push the schedule and they cram the patches in, there's room for a 0.7. I think Brian's leaning towards saying there'd be 0.7. I'm saying that it'll be 0.6, which means that, that 0.65 versus 0.75 would be the last update we would get prior to going in. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is 4.5 is important because 0.1, 0.3, and 0.5 are where we're getting our 3 Return to Evil East raids. So we know we're getting that. And then by the time you throw in the fact that we're getting our Monster Hunter collab and stuff like that, a 0.6 seems to be an obvious solution. 0.7 means they have to introduce another raid without introducing new story beyond the Return to Evil East. So it would have to be something geared at setting us up for an expansion without spoiling an expansion. And so I think that would be very hard for them to do. It's not to say they can't do it. It's what they do for a living. So I think this is interesting. I think they do plan to go beyond it. They're not going to do too much beyond talking about where they are now. They've got enough things wrong with what they're going to do to rebalance Eureka, how they're going to tie in Heaven on High, are they going to continue making ultimates? There's a lot of big things in the works that are being talked about, so I think they're really not focused on telling us how long until the expansion ends until we get to our first FanFest this November, and then we'll learn a little more as they go over to the EU, and then we'll learn a little more as they go over to Japan, and then it'll be time to play it. So hopefully that gives you a little more light on how that question is going to be answered and why it doesn't come up in Q&As. Pornographic. I can't imagine your name was part of the reason you're banned. Banned from forums like that forever over dumb reasons too. Can someone post this question on my behalf? I have been playing Final Fantasy XIV since 1.0, and I feel there isn't enough lateral content to do for veteran players like myself outside of Savage Raids and Ultimate Fights. Will there ever be more diverse in-game content for veteran players to give us more diversity in content and gear? The game gets quite boring in between patch cycles, and even during some content patches, the content is easy to complete within the first couple of weeks. And this is something that Final Fantasy really struggles with. And you don't realize it until you talk to players from other MMOs that because certain systems come out kind of halfway done, like you have this wonderful squadron system that, you know, I know that we've been talking about this, especially with like Jelly over on stream on Twitch. You know, they come out with something like the Squadron system or the Chocobo system or Lords of Verminion or Triple Triad or Chocobo races, and there's this initial system that has all this momentum, and then they never pick up and carry on into a second chapter. And so because of that, you have no end game. And it's nice that we're starting to see things like Namatsu for crafters and gatherers, but we had a gatherer one last time, and really once you get that mount and you've capped all of your gatherers and crafters at 70, it doesn't help engage you in a system where it has new and unique crafting recipes that force you to... That zone should have been turned into an entire group fates, group things like that are all for crafters and gatherers, and just turned it into a whole in-game system of its own, in my opinion. It could have been a lot bigger. Not to say I don't like the Namatsu, I do, but I think, like you said, they just need to take that other half a step. They're so close, and I mean this complaint from a point of love. I love this game, and I just think that it is on the edge of being something amazing. So I always stick around because I'm waiting for it to take that next step, that next move to give us something really lateral and a deeper, more engaged system where I don't have to be in a hardcore static to truly feel that I'm getting joy out of the time that I'm willing to put into the game. So I'm with you, and I think that it's a fair question. I don't know what they're doing to kind of increase that. I think Eureka is a huge time sink, but if it's not for you, then there really isn't a whole lot in the 4.3 cycle that's worth grinding outside of the crafters and gatherers getting them all capped. Now the crafting and gathering system has, because you can now upgrade your crafted gear to 360, it has an incredible resurgence on the market, and it's worth a ton of money. So you crafters and gatherers got something. You people that were old, 1.0 players got your grindy Eureka. You Ultimate players got something. But the just general people that just want to kind of work on their house and grind through some dungeons and dabble in a few things in here and get lost in, collecting a few more mounts, a few more minions, there really wasn't a whole lot in this patch for them. And it was definitely a patch that sets up for a really strong 4.4, but it better be a strong 4.4 for those players, or they risk kind of losing momentum with that section of players going into 5.0. Let's see if I can be a little less long-winded with this one. And Spirit Detective says, I can't post my question on the thread, but if someone would be so kind as to do it for me, are there going to be new commendation achievements? And the achievement system is something that I'm absolutely with you on. It needs to be something that they really engage with. And by that, I don't just mean, oh, well, it's up to 5,000 now, let's set it to 6,000. I mean something new and different. Like, can you collect commendations? How many times can you collect 3 commendations in an instance? How many times can you give commendations in a week? How many, so there needs to be more engaging systems across every single section of achievements and every single section of your challenge log. It can't just be, you did 10 of something, can you do 20 of it? It needs to be something that says, how many commendations can you get from tanks? How many commendations can you get from healers? And you don't really know where your commendation comes from, but it should track that. Something where it says, there's something unique about what you're doing. There's something unique about the play you're doing where you're targeting this achievement, and then the reward for it needs to match that. So more transmog, more mounts, and they don't have to. I know a lot of people are like, well, what about the resources they'd have to spend on that? Don't worry about it, because they can do things like reuse mounts. So you could have like the Magitech mount, where we have the one Magitech mount we got in game. I think there might be another one from comms, I'm not sure off the top of my head. And then we have the ones on the log store, the white one and the red one that are purchasable. Well, that's all well and good, but why isn't there a green one from some crafting achievements, and a blue one from some gathering achievements, and a black one from some PvP achievements? And there could be all these different colors that are just different shades on the same mounts that we already have in game. You have unicorns and Magitech mounts and horses and dogs and all of these things. There's no reason to not reuse those for achievements. So if you have dogs being set to the raids in an expansion, then go ahead and set dogs to a reasonable level of, you've done this many raids, or you've had this experience in raids, or you've died this many times in raids, or something like that, where they give you, a similar reward of a color that they hadn't used yet. That's kind of my opinion. I'm with you, Spirit, and I feel like I'm being long-winded again. Thank you guys so much. I loved the comments section on this video. You guys absolutely had a lot of fantastic questions. I wish they would tackle those instead of picking the easy ones that are either, no, that's a dumb question, or We can't do that right now because of technical reasons, and that's all we're going to say. So I wish they could get more of these. I don't know if these just aren't the popular and like really common questions, so that's why they're not being asked, or it's because they don't want to have to answer these because they are really hard. They're really good questions. So thank you guys so much. Definitely keep that conversation going on down below, and have a fantastic week. This has been Chris with Work to Game. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys take care, and I will see you next time.
Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to check out any other videos, you should click over here. And then we've got like some kind of vlog thing down here in the corner. And then we've got like subscribe. Like that's really, you should totally do it. This was a complete disaster.